Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 4. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, we are going to be chatting on
Babylon. That doesn't work.
Well, I mean, it sort of works. We're going to be
it in.
Yeah, we're going to keep it in. Yeah. We're going to be chatting about Babylon.
Yeah.
Damien Chazelle's exploration of the hedonism and excess of the 1920s, more specifically, the film genre. Its birth, the craziness that kept it alive, and its struggle to transition to the era of talkies in the early 1930s onwards. We will also be talking about some of our favourite LA films.
Yes.
Some examples of self-reflective Hollywood, which is a very common trend.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the film itself, which is pretty broad.
Yeah.
It's a pretty broad film, and there's lots of things, I don't know about you, Ben, but I feel a little bit uncertain about.
Yeah.
Some I like, some I'm not sure.
It was a big kind of collage of ideas. And
yes, agreed.
I will get into it more in the actual discussion, but I mean, first thoughts is it's just scattershot, basically.
It is, and that means we're going to have a discussion that's going to go off on lots of interesting tangents and about lots of great films. So it's fair to say it's going to be pretty meaty. So settle down and tuck in.
Questing the cinematic void.
So then, as we said before, lots of things to get through, lots of subjects to talk about, as this film is very broad, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It seems fitting, though, to talk more about the location into which the film is set, LA.
Los
Angeles.
Los
Angeles, a place that is all too often the setting of many sort of self-reflective pieces on Hollywood. I find the LA film is often an exploration of the dissonance between assumption and reality.
Okay.
In the sense that Hollywood, we expect it to be this sort of dreamlike place of creativity.
Yeah.
And joy. The joy that comes with creativity, and that everyone involved in these films is going to be skipping around happy and wealthy, always counting their lucky stars that are there.
Yeah. Forever young.
Yes. But it's often, of course, not the case. Yeah. And a lot of these films juxtapose that assumption with the harsh reality. The darkness, the seedy underbelly, and the excess that often comes with a life of isolation. And I think there are many films that do this brilliantly. And I believe you want to introduce the first filmmaker who's done this, perhaps better than anyone else, certainly in more modern times.
David Lynch.
Yes.
Specifically, I mean, most notably, Mulholland Drive, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's the definitive LA movie, really.
Yeah.
And it touches on, in quite a sort of obvious way, what you were talking about just then, which is, you know, the glitz and the glamour and the kind of hope that a city like this could afford, especially, you know, towards a young actress, and then the dark, grimy, seedy underbelly of the city kind of rears its ugly head. It's quite a kind of, for Lynch anyway, it's sort of quite a classic narrative trope for him to explore. Love that. I love Mulholland Drive. I think it's really, really quite striking, unusual, frightening. And it kind of happens in quite unexpected places, so you never really know. You're never sitting comfortably when you're watching it, which is a really nice way to illustrate what the opinion that a lot of directors, I'm sure, have about Los Angeles.
Yeah, no, I think I had the pleasure. Well, the last time I saw it, I had the pleasure of seeing it on the cinema screen, which was an amazing experience. I mean, obviously, any film is 10 times more potent on a cinema screen, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know why specifically 10 times, possibly more times, probably more times. But yeah, it just enhances all of the qualities of the film. One thing that really strikes me, and I really like that point you say about the sort of hopes and dreams of people that go there. Yeah. It's this place where people are so sort of either fascinated or sort of enraptured by this idea of it being this place where dreams come true. Yeah. And I think that really sort of ties in well, not only to the darker aspects of Mulholland Drive, but also Lynch's approach to the film itself in terms of narrative, because it feels like it starts off in a somewhat linear fashion. Yeah. Linear for Lynch, anyway.
Oh, my, yeah.
And then it sort of slowly descends more into this sort of dreamy, sort of nightmare hellscape.
Yeah.
And that speaks quite a lot, I think, to the idea of unmasking that dream and masking what achieving that really actually means and what that entails, what you have to sacrifice personally, socially, even physically to attain that dream.
Yeah, I just sort of thinking about it now. I remember the beginning, like the first 20 minutes. Naomi Watts' character, who is an aspiring actress, just moved to the city.
Yeah,
she literally sounds like she's trying to imitate like one of those kind of classical Hollywood actresses. Like in the way she speaks, everything's so oh my god,
just bubbling with optimism.
Yeah, to the point where she's kind of putting it on, because later on in the film that all fucking goes away.
Yeah, the facade
really
crumbles.
quickly.
It's putting it mildly, yeah.
But I mean, that's very Lynchy. It's sort of almost, a bit like Twin Peaks is soap opera. He's doing it almost in the style of a soap opera. It was meant to be a TV show originally, Mulholland Drive.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's just so, like, it's funny for a filmmaker who's renowned for keeping his cards close to his chest. It's so obvious what he's trying to say with Mulholland Drive, because it's so, like, there's a definite sort of linearity to that film, as abstract as it can get.
Yeah,
the central message is, like, right there.
Yeah,
Los Angeles is not the kind of city. It's kind of brutal and uncompromising. That's sort of what he's trying to say.
Agreed. Yeah, I think what he does really so brilliantly, and I think this is perhaps something that isn't sort of acknowledged enough. There's a sort of a mastery of melodrama here in his in the film, and I think when you mention that opening, she's coming up an escalator, isn't she? And she's talking to the elderly couple, and the elderly couple she's met on the flight in. And
that's
the
right.
camera is like, everything's really sort of bright and almost to the point of like sort of being
there's a bloom
piercing.
Yeah.
I think that sort of melodramatic element that he harnesses so well. It sort of reminds me of filmmakers like Douglas Sirk, who would use the melodrama to sort of poke holes at American suburbia. Poke holes at ideas of the American dream and the American identity. And Lynch is doing this here to poke holes in the American dream, or indeed a wider dream, the dream of success.
Yeah.
The dream of being part of this landscape that fulfills the wildest dreams of not just the people that take part in the films, allegedly, or at least the idea it wants to present, to the consumer, and of course the dreams of the consumer themselves, or themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
So another film then, I mean, this is something that you actually mentioned earlier, and I'm stealing, is Maps to the Stars by Cronenberg.
Ah, yes.
Obviously, there's some thematic similarities between this and Mulholland Drive in the sense that it's a sort of exploration of the darker aspects of Hollywood, the unseen aspects of Hollywood.
Yeah.
But this, I think, doubles down on that, and there is a linearity here.
Yeah.
And there is a sort of, there is something. I mean, surreal is a word that is banded around. Any film that's like slightly hazy in its narrative is just labelled immediately surreal.
Yeah.
But there is something about the surreal nature of this film and how disconnected from humanity these people are that have achieved that success.
Yeah.
It's almost like getting success means you have like to take an ice cream scoop to your soul and your being.
Yeah.
And then once you have done that, they spend a lot of time and money trying to get it back.
Yeah.
And they don't realise that the landscape itself, the individuals that they share this space with, are part of the reason why they've become the way they are.
Okay. I remember, the only thing that I really remember in great detail about that film is the child actor, his story.
Oh, yeah.
He's like 12, and somehow, even though he's like ridiculously successful, he's already been addicted to drugs, and he is now recovering from that affliction already. It's like, what?
Yeah.
He's 12. He's like 12 years old. I mean, Maps to the Stars is kind of chock full of those, the LA people, right? The movie. It's the movie type.
It's the closest thing I can think of to sort of achieving that Bret Easton Ellis sort of critique of LA. I mean, a lot of his books centre on that, and I think the idea of just how just nothing meaningful is said between anybody.
Yeah,
there's nothing real to grab hold of. It's all just posturing and
meetings,
just
filled with meetings. That film, just like auditions and meetings and people going to fancy restaurants and coffee shops and just talking about their careers. And like that boy's parents as well, kind of basically living off his sort of fortune. Yeah, effectively.
Yeah. Jude Law.
Jude Law, the star of Maps to the Stars.
Julianne Moore's performance in the film is unbelievably good. I remember there was some scenes of her just doing yoga breaking into tears and just crying like hysterically.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that just sort of, it's pretty sort of overt, but it really does achieve the messages of the film really, really rather well.
Yeah.
Because it is something that I think is almost sort of like, I guess, like a microcosm of the wider obsession with fame in our society and the way in which we chase it.
Yeah.
And how potentially dangerous and sickening that can be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with having aspirations to be a musician or an artist of any kind. But I mean, if you get to this point where you are sacrificing everything else in pursuit of that dream, that's when it starts to become dangerous.
Yeah.
I assume.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
you are listening to two wannabe filmmakers here who've sort of just sacked it off and decided to sit and talk to microphones instead.
And have never been to Los Angeles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are literally toddlers that are better travelled than I am, and yet here I am talking about it.
But I mean, I feel like we sort of have been there because of the movies we've watched, maybe ever so slightly. I mean, some people from work went there and they said it was shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they really didn't like it. I thought it was really, like, I mean, they get painted a picture and then obviously go to the actual location and it's just, there's no, like, public transport. The wealth inequality is, like, in your face.
Okay.
And pretty dreadful.
And it's also, I mean, I sort of get the impression, again, from the media that I've consumed, but a lot of it just seems to be, like you say, success and then failure.
Yeah.
And there are so many people that are just sort of clinging on to the last vestiges of a dying dream in like coffee shops and or even in worse situations where they've succumbed to vices as a way of coping with failure.
Yeah.
I mean, these are extreme examples, and there's also nothing wrong with working in a coffee shop.
Oh, no.
However, but, you know, the idea is that, you know,
you were aspiring to be earning 3 million a year kind of thing, and you've ended up basically the same as if you stayed in, I don't know, North Carolina or something.
Yeah. Skegness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Working at the Butlins.
I would say there's nothing wrong with working in Butlins, but there definitely is.
Yeah. For our loyal Butlins employees, listeners, I do apologise. So, a film I wanted to briefly touch on, which I haven't actually seen, Under the Silver Lake.
Okay. Nor have I. So this is going to be insightful.
Yeah. I just find it interesting that directors, a lot of their sophomore efforts happen to be set in Los Angeles. I think it's because they've moved there and all of a sudden have something to say about the city. So the screenplays they subsequently write after making it big with their first film, in this case, David Robert Mitchell. He directed It Follows.
Excellent.
Fantastic film.
Yeah.
Clearly moved to Los Angeles and then made Under the Silver Lake, which is kind of, I mean, from the looks of the trailer, it looks like a bit of a Mulholland Drive rip-off.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that. That's actually what put me off. And I sort of hate being that person to be put off by, you know, general opinion that you read. But, I mean, that was the case.
Yeah.
So you were going to then suggest someone else, weren't you? Someone else who did something similar.
Yes. Richard Kelly.
Yes.
With Southland Tales.
So we both have seen this one. We can talk about this one.
I fucking love this film.
I do.
Yeah. Nobody's seen it either. I swear to God. I try and get people to borrow it.
Yeah.
But either they don't have a Blu-ray player or are straight up just not interested.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, it's comparable in a way to Babylon in the sense that this is a far-reaching assessment of a period of time.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's clearly a filmmaker that is perhaps too confident. Obviously, he was riding high after the success of Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
The studio fucking gives him loads of money.
Yeah.
And he's like, right, I'm going to take the sort of the early noughties to task.
Yeah.
And in a way, I don't know if this is more sort of laced in sort of nostalgia, in a way that I can't be for Babylon, for obvious reasons. But I really like his effort to do that. I mean, some of it is shit.
Yeah.
Some of it is great.
It's unfinished.
Some of it's middling, but so many elements of that film are quite poor.
Yeah.
And yet I find myself, I mean, when I first saw it, because I remember you and one of our dear friends, Lee, would always talk to me about that. And you'd always mention it at least once when we were talking about films. And I was thinking, I remember being told a lot of that film's shit. And then everyone keeps telling me, you guys, obviously, you know, I trust your guys' opinion. So I watched it and I was just blown away by the sort of thematic vastness of it, and some of the casting choices and how deliberate that sort of feels, and tying into this sort of critique of the
I feel like
growing
they were
vapidity and horror of the modern world.
Yeah, they would. I think they were just bizarre, but totally deliberate.
Yeah,
Going back to what you were saying about him getting given like a lot of money to do whatever the fuck he wanted.
yeah.
So yeah, he apparently cast a lot of actors and actresses that he thought had hidden talent, like Sean William Scott, Sarah Michelle Gellar.
I mean, these are great. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say beforehand in the sort of opening spiel about the film, Sean William Scott is good in this film.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, like he
I love it.
clearly has acting chops. He's obviously someone that's been completely typecast forever now. I mean, Stifler was
Yeah.
both a blessing and a curse for him, right? I mean, he's never going to break that mold.
No, he's not.
But he's clearly capable, and he shows that in this film.
I would love to see him in more stuff, actually.
Yeah.
This film has, I think, one of the best taglines of any film ever, because it sums up the entire. What I feel is it's open to interpretation, Southland Tales, because it's bonkers.
Yeah.
But the film's tagline is, "This is the way the world ends, not with a whimper, with a bang," and I just love that. It's a quote from an old book or something, but that's what I think the film's about. I think it's Richard Kelly, his move to LA, realised how bizarre and just outside of normalcy it is, and decided to make a film about that.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think he thinks the way the world is going to end is going to start with Los Angeles.
Sort of, okay.
Yeah.
The dawn of the end starts in LA.
Yeah.
I like that, and I also what I want to say about the film in regards to its similarities with Babylon is that structurally, or the sort of execution of some of these sort of critiques or some of this exploration of the sort of the time, I mean, it really borders on sort of pastiche, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's clearly sort of trying to ape, certain scenes of other films that have just done that better.
Yeah.
But for some reason, unlike Babylon, and we'll go into that a little bit later, why it was a bit of an issue for me, in this film, I forgive it. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
I think it's just because I was completely prepared to settle into this rhythm of being like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And that somehow allowing me to sort of forgive the film.
Yeah, it's one of those films where I genuinely enjoy every time I watch it, I'll look it up and read about it for hours afterwards.
Yeah.
And just like, it's been given to its audience.
Yeah.
And there's some really wild and really interesting theories about what it means.
Yeah.
And you can kind of have your own, and you can feel valid in that opinion.
Yeah.
Whereas Babylon isn't really like that. It's kind of, it's not spoon-fed to you, but it's a lot less abstract in that regard.
Yes, agreed.
But there's a lot of similarities as well. I mean, down to the way it's structured, it follows a fair few different
strands.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
groups
they
of
don't always
people.
coalesce necessarily, but
No.
yeah, no, I agree. So another film I'd like to mention, just briefly, because it doesn't really tie into anything in terms of the themes of any of the films we've just discussed and their relationship to Babylon, but Predator 2 is set in LA.
Ooh.
I just googled that before because I thought there's got to be a couple more that I want to talk about on Predator 2.
Okay.
Criminally overlooked,
Okay.
or often maligned as a poor sequel. And I
Yeah.
just think that's utter rubbish. I think it's great, and I think actually the film itself structurally is better.
Okay.
First Predator.
Yeah.
I think I love the Predator films. I'm completely down with what they're trying to do. I would say that Predator 1 is made by someone that's got more competence in action cinema, totally.
Yeah.
But where Predator 2 shines is in its execution of that sort of 80s excess,
Yeah.
the obsession with violence,
Yeah.
and all of these things that, of course, people like Verhoeven did better.
Yeah.
But it's there and it's present, and I think the film is overlooked a lot.
Okay. I need to rewatch Predator 2. I do remember watching it with the right frame of mind and being pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Because I was told by a lot of people that it was shit.
Yeah.
But it came as a box set. So as I watched the first, I've got to just
of
watch
course.
it so
Yeah.
it's done and I can put it on my shelf and not think about it again. But I remember seeing it a few times. It's really good fun.
Yeah. I mean, it has nothing to do with any of the themes we're discussing, but I'm throwing it in there because I like the film.
I do.
And if you disagree, you're
You're wrong.
wrong.
Yeah.
And a grotesquely ugly freak.
Nice. I did want to briefly touch on films like Hail Caesar, which relate a lot to Babylon, I think, in that just in terms of how it portrays the film industry. Hail Caesar's a lot better than Babylon, I think. I've only seen it the once, but I remember really enjoying it.
Yeah, I liked Hail Caesar. Michael Bay didn't. You know?
No, I didn't.
Michael Bay invited some of his friends round to watch it in his private cinema at home, and he started watching it, and I think he got something ridiculous like 20 minutes in, and he turned it off and apologised to his mates for inviting them over.
No way.
Yeah, Michael Bay thought Hail Caesar was a load of shit.
Oh my god.
Not enough robots in it.
No,
not enough robots or police chasers or whatever.
Oh, that's so weird.
That is strange, isn't it?
Because it's not the kind of film that was sort of that divided people in that way.
I think he comes from that school of filmmaking where it is about the experience in terms of spectacle. So any film that doesn't match with that is perhaps to him not as enjoyable.
Okay.
I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of his taste. I have no idea, but given the films he makes, that's the assumption I would make.
Fair enough.
But anyway, carry on. That's a sort of pretty pointless aside, but I'm mentioning it.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it ties into what Babylon was trying to do a lot, although it has that kind of Coen-esque humour that just kind of turns the whole thing into a bit of a farce.
Yeah.
And you got George Clooney, and he's with his sort of, he's been kidnapped, and there's that sort of Stockholm syndrome. It's got all that going on as well, but it's just got a lot of scenes in it that are on new Hollywood movie sets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just reminded me of Babylon a little bit. When I was watching it, I remember thinking this film was a hell of a lot like Hail Caesar and Boogie Nights.
Yeah, agreed. Very much so. To its detriment, you probably.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah, I'd say that. Did you want to talk a little bit about
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Oh yes, definitely.
I mean, that seems to be. I think I remember reading a review on Letterboxd, and you were saying about how the performances in Babylon feel like they've been lifted from other films.
Yeah,
I would say both of the performances in the film, certainly the more famous performers in the film.
Yeah,
Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie. You could see a lot of parallels between both of their characters, but they're sort of ramped up to 11 for Chazelle here in a way that I think suits the tone that he's going for, but perhaps doesn't really serve the film overall.
No, I find it a bit distracting. I remember thinking their performances were just almost to the letter exactly the same as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which on reflection I think it's definitely one of Tarantino's better efforts.
Yeah,
as a sort of love letter to Hollywood, it worked.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like kind of showering Hollywood with love to the extent where it was overbearing. And it has a kind of sinister side to it with the sort of the whole thing with Sharon Tate and the Manson murders. And it just sort of, although it was similarly sort of scattershot and there was a lot going on, a lot of different characters to follow, it did kind of sharpen it to a nice fine point.
I agree. I think Tarantino is just good at writing that sort of vignette style story where you've got different characters and he'll pick them up, drop them, move on to the next character and come back round to them. And eventually their stories tend to sort of merge at some point.
Yeah.
I think it's more of an exercise in sort of enveloping you in the atmosphere of the time, the feel of the time.
Yeah.
And there's clear reverence there from Tarantino, just as much as there is reverence from Chazelle in Babylon.
Yeah.
And I admire both of them for that. But I think Tarantino is just a bit more assured in that.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a longer career.
He has, and I also think he's not as... I think Chazelle is very... I mean, we're going to talk about this a bit later on, but I find Chazelle's dynamic approach to camera use quite distracting in the sense that it almost sort of says, look at this, look how... Whoa, like... And it's like...
We hired a crane.
Yeah.
A big crane.
Look how this ties into how much I love this stuff. And I think, fair enough, but there's a control in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think, that serves the film better and serves the intention better of, taking us back to that period in history, a period that he clearly loves, and many people do as well, as a sort of hugely significant moment in film history.
Yeah. Okay. We also have Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal, directed by Dan Gilroy, who went on to do another LA movie called Velvet Buzzsaw. Polar opposites in terms of actual films, but Nightcrawler touches on, I say, to the extreme, the sort of darker side of Los Angeles.
Yeah,
very kind of crime-ridden. It looks a little bit like Sin City. You know what I mean? It's just damp, dark, always dark, kind of soulless
Yeah.
industrial landscape.
Yeah.
And it centres on someone who, whereas in films like sort of Mulholland Drive and Babylon, the obsession is kind of a positive one, right? So the aspirations that they have are just fame and fortune, but with Nightcrawler, it's something a lot more sort of nuanced and sinister. And I think as a film set in Los Angeles, I should say, it reminds me of Collateral a little bit. It's another good LA movie.
Oh, what a film that is!
Yeah,
What a great film that is.
You kind of have to mention those sort of dark, dank, crime-ridden landscape that a lot of directors seem to kind of lean towards sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the case of Nightcrawler, I mean, it is, like you say, the furthest reaches of that sort of exploration in terms of this guy's, he wants to be top of his game, but in a pretty grim field.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's funny, like he sort of wants the same thing as like Margot Robbie's character in Babylon. He wants to be noticed, and he wants the attention to be on him.
Yeah.
But it's presented in such a drastically different fashion, and it kind of reveals the way he manipulates people and the way he kind of it is sort of selfish to the point of being a bit of a sociopath.
Yeah, completely.
And yet it's the aspirations are the same. I just thought it was just kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I think it sort of says something more about the wider cultural issue of wanting to record those things. So his job is to go and record like tragedy, car crashes, horror.
Yeah.
Basic day-to-day horror.
Yeah.
That befalls very unfortunate people. And it speaks to a wider critique of this sort of growing interest in things like that. And the reason that he's allowed to do that is because of this sort of macabre interest.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this isn't just Los Angeles. It's true of any city, really. I mean, as soon as you kind of get into a more of a metropolitan area, you start to notice people's tastes get a little bit more sort of sinister, because this kind of people watch this stuff. Like, people watch kind of horrible, shaky handycam footage of a car crash that has just happened 3 blocks down or something.
Yeah,
and it's entertainment. It's not journalism.
No.
It's kind of like going to the circus or something.
Yeah, no, I agree. It sort of reminds me of like this sort of obsession with programming. I mean, it's not quite to the same extent of it, but stuff like police interceptors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
like
there's
not a shred of like actual journalism going on there. It's just watch Terry, who likes Fast and Furious 6, drive his police Subaru around the housing estate and telling someone off for smoking a spliff. You know what I mean? It's like it's that there's something. Some people find that bizarrely engaging and interesting to submerge themselves in those worlds, and I think the reason for that is, I think, quite strange. Personally,
no.
If you watch Police Interceptors, fair enough.
Good luck to you.
Yeah, good luck to you. Yeah. I think you're right. I think speaks a lot to the darker underbelly of LA, which is something that with Collateral and various other films, they explore that. I mean, it is a place where such a small percentage of people achieve these dreams, so it's only, I guess, natural to some extent that they would fall into some kind of darkness, and I guess that's where criminality profits off the sort of the failure of
which
of
there
others.
is. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's ridiculous the amount of people that live in cities like Los Angeles and have just totally failed.
Yeah, basically. I mean, statistically, you are more likely to. I mean, not to be too dour on this podcast, but there are thousands of people that have, I imagine, have not had the best luck there.
Yeah.
And fair play to those that keep plugging away.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Fair play to you, because you've got more gumption than I have. I'd have given up after a week. I'm going back to Derby for a bit.
Yeah. Fuck this.
Fuck this shit. I'm off. I'm off back to O2. Good. Well, I think that's lots of interesting films there, and I think a lot of themes that tie into Babylon quite nicely. So before we move on to discuss Babylon, I was thinking more about wanting to discuss films that reflect on Hollywood more. Okay. I mean, we've sort of talked about that a little bit already with some of the films. They definitely do reflect not just on the landscape and the people, but the industry itself. So obviously, Hollywood is indebted to the industry. Yeah. That's the reason it's there. But I think it does have a tendency to reflect on the mechanical aspects of the industry, how it works. And it makes me think of films like Robert Altman's The Player, a film that is very sort of critical of, like you said before, there's Hollywood types, the discussions they have in meetings, the sort of cacophonous dialogue exchanges.
Do lunch kind of thing.
Nothing. People just get lost.
Yeah.
People are just getting lost in these discussions, and you just get this sense that people are just sort of floating down a current they have very little control over.
Yeah.
But I think a film that shows that the biggest similarities thematically is Sunset Boulevard.
Nice.
Pretty sort of film studies 101 movie. It's not particularly out there to discuss it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I sort of said it with, haha, this will shock people. I've got the DVD case here because for some reason I've forgotten the names of the actors and the people involved. Gloria Swanson plays Nora Desmond, who is a silent film star who's been chewed up and spat out by the industry upon the arrival of the talkies, which is a huge part of Babylon.
Yes, yeah.
And the casualties that get left behind. And it's not something that I think a lot of people, including myself, until I started watching these films and reading up on their history a few years ago, would have really understood just how many casualties they were. People that could act without sound suddenly being given sound and just not be able to do it.
Yeah, I guess like the audiences would project a voice onto them, and then when it turned out to be something completely different, that's it. Like the illusion's destroyed.
It is, and I think for some, and again, we keep dipping into Babylon quite a lot throughout this discussion, but I think there's this line from one of the characters that says to Brad Pitt, I think it's Kim Cattrall's character.
Yeah, okay.
She says, sometimes it's just it, and it's just the end.
Yeah.
And I think for Norma Desmond, it is the end. And she etches out this sad existence in a sort of this crooked, dilapidated mansion, which is itself like just a giant homage to that period of the Roaring Twenties.
Right, yeah.
And she lounges around this house, holding on to the memories of the success and the power that she used to command, both socially and within the industry. And she has her butler, played by Eric von Stronheim.
Oh, yes.
Who is like writing her fake letters from fans and just keeping this illusion going for her.
Yeah.
And then she meets William Holden, who's the down-and-out writer in modern Hollywood. And he reluctantly strikes a deal with her to write this script that she's cobbled together to sort of announce her return to Hollywood. It's a really dark movie in the sense that it explores just how vicious the industry can be when it's constantly chasing new innovation.
Yeah.
Not just innovation in the technological sense, but in terms of narrative and theme and what audiences want, and how quickly people can be just forgotten, pushed away,
Yeah. I mean, that just sort of speaks to the nature of art in general, isn't it? It's trends. It's not...
Especially commercial art for the masses.
Absolutely, yeah. And either, the model has got to be self-sustaining, and in order for that to happen, unfortunately, you've got to accept that there are going to be technological and narrative advancements which will push a lot of what people previously wanted and loved completely to the wayside.
Yeah.
And I think the first big one for Hollywood was the sound, the invention of the talkies and the kind of introduction of post-synced sound into cinema, which changed it obviously for the better, but there was a very clear and defined divide that happened almost instantly. I haven't seen Sunset Boulevard in a long time, but I do remember it being, like you say, like very, very tragic and very retrospective and uncompromising.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's almost nightmarish. I mean, the way that Desmond is just etching out her last years. Her wealth slowly dwindling, and just clutching on to the memories of these sort of slowly degrading memories of her past. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think it links really well to the themes of Babylon, which we're going to go into more, but there's just this sort of idea of the way Hollywood treats its stars, the way Hollywood treats the creatives. I mean, there's a pretty strong critique of how Hollywood treats its writers in Sunset Boulevard. Despite how essential they are to the process of getting a film made, they are sort of almost... they have achieved none of the stardom or the acknowledgement they probably deserve. Maybe not the stardom, but certainly the acknowledgement.
Yeah.
it rewards on rewatches. I think the first time I saw it, I was pretty green in this sort of film studies thing, so I wasn't really acknowledging that. I was sort of just more swept up by the sort of whole atmosphere of the film. But the more I watch it, the more it reveals Wilder's keen observations about the nature of the industry, the perils of innovation, the way it treats its stars. I mean, Hollywood has a pretty disgusting track record for the way it's treated its stars in the past. Making them change their names, making them
smoke early on.
I mean, and this is something again that Babylon touches on, this idea of celebrity culture, the obsession of celebrity culture, and how that, if marketed properly, can guarantee fiscal success like you've never dreamed, but at the expense of, again, the soul of the individual that you're sort of pushing more and more. Because in that time, the classic Hollywood studio model, the studio owned the talent, owned not only the crew, but the actors and actresses that were on screen, and had more than enough rights, apparently, to sort of dictate their personal, private lives. Yeah. And I don't know, I think the film touches on these things. Perhaps not the sort of the private life aspect, because by this point Desmond is a sort of dinosaur in the eyes of the studios, and they're not interested in her. But I think it does speak to that, and also this idea that Hollywood will be here forever. It's here to stay. And we find out, obviously, this is before the collapse of old Hollywood, that isn't necessarily the case. So I think we should move on then to Babylon itself, because we've sort of we've cut flecks off it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing I want to say about the film, that despite the negativity you might think we have for it, and I don't want to speak for you necessarily, Ben, but I'm going to say that we both didn't hate it, perhaps as much as it seems in the discussion.
I didn't hate it at all.
No.
It was just... It was slightly disappointing in how it unfolded.
Yeah.
I think, ultimately. I didn't really come out of the cinema knowing what it was definitively about. Mm-hmm. It started out as this kind of hedonistic, very, very explicit kind of party movie, and then turned into a Hollywood fable, and then ended like a love letter. It wasn't. It didn't really know which direction it wanted to go, and it ended up just being a bit of a muddled mix of all three.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah,
I think there were real gem moments in the film, which we're going to discuss. But I'm completely with you in that sort of the way in which Chazelle clearly wants to desperately achieve all those things. He wants to sort of mythologize the birth of cinema.
Yeah.
He wants to tackle the more heart-rendering moments of those actors that are left at the wayside, or the people whose livelihoods have just been crushed by the technological innovation of recording sound.
Yeah.
But I agree, there's just too much going on here.
Yeah.
I would like to start, though, in the beginning.
Yeah.
The film, as we've said a few times, the word hedonism has come up a few times, but it's entirely apt.
Yeah.
Because it is about the sort of the Roaring Twenties, a period of time famously explored by F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby. This time of excess, almost at the expense of anything else.
Yeah.
My gripe, however, is not necessarily a huge gripe, but it's something I wrestled with as soon as I came out of the cinema and continue to wrestle with now, is how that hedonism is portrayed, because it seems really fucking exaggerated.
Yeah.
For a few reasons. But one reason, I was reading online and I was just doing some research for the film. We do our own research. We do our own research.
Yes.
We don't mess around. But, the idea that everyone involved is like drunk 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
I mean, a film historian pointed out that whilst that aesthetically is entertaining, if that was the case, nothing would get done.
No.
I mean, the film industry at that point in the 20s, it overshot everyone's expectations in terms of its popularity.
Yeah.
It was the fourth biggest industry in America at that time.
Jesus.
So it's not... This is clearly something that I think a lot of people... There's this technological innovation with the camera and this idea that we can make stories out of it.
Yeah.
And people are still trying to fathom how that works. And then all of a sudden, you've got all this money to play with. And obviously that's going to impact people negatively. And positively, I guess. But I just think that the way that Chazelle handles that, I don't know, it seemed more to me like an excuse for him to use flashy camera moves that he's very good at. The film looks great, and his camera moves are always great. I mean, he's one of the most dynamic use of the camera that I can think of in modern Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely.
But it just felt too flashy to the point that it was distracting from the ideas and themes of the film, and also stretching that element to the point of farce.
Yeah. Do you think maybe he made it sort of how he imagined the 20s were?
Yeah.
Based on his own kind of consumption of media, as opposed to doing a little bit more historical research?
Well, I think there's obviously going to be, I think it's very well documented that the 20s was a time of excess, if you were rich, obviously.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, yeah.
But I think you're partially right about that. I think also, it's anchored in some area of truth. The house where the parties are based is based on like a real life house for socialites and people in Hollywood that went there and apparently could essentially do whatever they wanted.
Right. Okay.
However, if it was like a sort of 24-hour jazz-fueled coke binge orgy, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case. Who knows? But a lot of people echo that. Yeah. A lot more credible people. Sorry, I'm not leading them. I'm just actually stealing their thoughts. Right. No, but it's just something I felt, and I just think that whilst entertaining and whilst gives a lot of scope for Chazelle to move that camera around very competently. That must have been, from a blocking perspective, a fucking nightmare. Yeah. But Chazelle's clearly adept at that because it looks great.
It does, yeah.
But I just wonder how much that really reflects the true aspect of the film. Because I think it undermines it a little bit in the sense that isn't that exciting enough? If you're a film fan, like Chazelle clearly is, and we are, surely just focusing on that period is enough. Why dress it up more?
Well, like going back to what I was saying earlier, like how it ends is like, hey, this is my love letter to Hollywood. Yeah. And so why begin it in with a scenario that is fanciful? Yeah. And portraying things like people getting chucked out of windows and probably raped, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of darkness there.
A lot of horrible stuff happened, and that's no secret. But he presents it in kind of a Wolf of Wall Streety way, you know? And there was some confusion there because it ended so drastically different. Yeah,
again, I'm so undecided about it. I just feel like, I don't know, it definitely warps it to the point of distraction for me. As to how much it really bothers me, I'm still not 100% sure, but it's definitely something that I just felt from the offset as one of the more sort of divisive elements of the film. Okay. And that seems to be something that's shared quite a lot among a lot of people when you just have a cursory read on Letterboxd or you have a look on the sort of reviews. People either really buy into that or they really don't. And I don't know, I'm sort of going to contradict myself already by saying I sort of sit in the middle of that.
I didn't like it. There was definitely points in the film I kind of got on with. Brad Pitt's arc I thought was quite touching in places. Not perfect again, but going back to what we were saying about the temporary nature of being a kind of Hollywood star and how different your lifestyle can change. If you get used to a certain lifestyle, you'll come to sort of hold that dear to you, and then it gets sort of ripped away from you so quickly. He kind of carried that, although I do have some problems with his performance, in that I thought it was quite derivative of his other roles. The way his kind of arc was written, I thought was quite nice. Yeah, and one of the easier ones to follow.
Agreed. I also like that he wrestles with. I think Catherine Watterson plays his sort of pretentious theatre partner, doesn't he?
That's right.
In sort of classic Hollywood star style, they got married about 19 times in their lives, and this is one of the many partners that he has in the film. But what I quite like about it is that he wrestles with her, and I think with himself in terms of the cultural worth of the medium, because film at this point is fairly early. So, it's an early medium. It's still figuring itself out, and the film goes to great lengths to show in its construction that it's still very much a sort of people are still figuring the little details out of the filmmaking process, the sort of madness of it. The film really doubles down on that in a way that makes me not sure about how real that was either. But it was pretty entertaining. It looked great. There's a great sequence with the big the sort of battle scene that they film.
Oh yeah, and him going to get the camera. That was a cool moment.
I liked that.
It's peppered with those moments. Like, it does have individual points which are like just ridiculously entertaining. Yeah. It was what was the other moment that there was quite a good gag in it. I don't know why it made me laugh so much. There's a bit where they're talking about how sound is going to change everything, and they're in a toilet.
Yeah,
and yeah. And someone was like, "Do you think this sound thing's good for films? Do you think it makes sense?"
Yeah.
And Brad Pitt's like, yeah, I think so. And then someone just takes the shit in the background.
Yeah,
it was a bit too meta, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean,
in
the film
itself.
does that a lot. I mean, it's varying success, but no, I agree with you. But I just want to go back to that idea of, wrestling with the cultural worth of the medium, because I think that's one of the film's stronger elements, certainly from Brad Pitt's performance in the film. And it made me think more broadly about how our relationship with the medium in itself, and how other mediums will quickly jump on and demonize the new kid on the block, so to speak. I think that, and that must have been what happened to film, because film is this new thing, and it's obviously incredibly popular, specifically with a certain strata of people. So it's not really for upper class people.
No, they touch on that in the film, don't
the
they?
sort of classist view of the film. That theatre's for the sort of snobs, and film is for the sort of
films for the working class
trolls.
The whole idea, the whole concept of the Nickelodeon, and the sort of the cheapness of it, meant that it appealed to quite universally. He has that lovely speech, doesn't he? It's such a nice, unexpected moment when his friends just finally kind of commit suicide.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Oh yeah, spoilers. But he just
he has lots of friends in the film. You don't know who it is.
Who is it, mate?
Or you probably work it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And for some reason, he just goes off on one, doesn't he, to his wife about how her interests are for the few, and his, and the things that he does, whilst they might on the outside seem quite trashy, they actually mean a lot to a lot of people, and that kind of touched me a little bit.
Yeah, it spoke to me in a way as well about because the negativity around like Marvel films. I mean, this might be a stretch, but I mean, if that means something to someone, should we judge that? You know what I mean? And we all say, definitely we should judge them, or definitely.
Oh no, definitely, definitely. As in, I agree with your point. We should judge them.
Yeah, we should.
Fucking Marvel,
grow up,
fanboys.
No, not at all. But I think it speaks more broadly to that idea. I thought, which I found quite interesting, the idea that people are going to be snobby about it, but if it genuinely gives you something like a feeling, then it's achieved it. It's achieved its goal in the same way an arty film would touch someone with higher tastes. And that might be something that a person with more highbrow taste would struggle to accept.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And that's how the film plays that debate out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that. When someone says that they like really loved a film which I kind of knew in my heart that I was never going to enjoy. Yeah, I struggle with that sometimes. Part of me wants to say to them, like, introduce them to more highbrow stuff, but then I just kind of think like, well, no, you're
who are we, man?
Yeah,
I mean, we are doing a film podcast. So who are we? What the fuck are we?
But it is just like, I mean, I had a discussion with my father-in-law quite recently, and he said he just kind of said, I just like films that entertain me. The same, and I kind of thought, like, I guess it's the same way that I like listening to music that sounds good in my ears. It's fine to just want to sit back and let something take you over. You don't have to think about it, and it can be an act of relaxation, not study, and that's absolutely fine. And my initial kind of gut reaction to that was to go, well, I want to show you this film and this film and this film, but then I just thought, like, no, that's like, he's never going to enjoy them, and that's fine.
I mean, there is a sort of opposing argument, I guess, in the sense that it would be nice if people enjoyed things more broadly, a more broader scope of things. But I don't know. I think it's a really complicated argument. But I do fundamentally believe in what we've just said. But I think tune into another episode and we'll be slagging off Marvel anyway. So there we go. That's how it works. But the idea of a new medium, and the only thing I could think of that's comparable is video games.
Okay.
So when video games came out, everyone did the same. They all shit on video games. It was like, it's not very good, or it's going to turn your child into an axe murderer. And there's this really interesting theory about the way media, or the different mediums fight. They're all pitching for your time. So they're all fighting amongst themselves for your time.
Right, okay.
And the only way that they can sort of solidify how much time you spend with them is by demonizing another one. Or the sort of the new kid on the block, the growing one, So
video games in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something I just thought about. And it's so interesting to me that people who would demonise video games, who would say be more into film,
Yeah.
you know, they probably would have been the same people who were sat in the rafters watching plays, slagging off films. You know what I mean? It's an interesting sort of thing I couldn't help but shake. This idea of how people sort of view a new medium. Either do they welcome it with open arms, or do they critique it on the basis that it's popular with a certain group of people?
Yeah.
I just found that element really interesting. I thought that was... I've got a sort of real long way.
No.
But, you know, I think that particular scene, as overt as it was, because there's quite a lot of, like...
It's a bit preachy.
Yeah, there's a lot of preachy sort of stand up and wave my hand and, you know, basically lay all of Chazelle's thematic cards on the table.
Yeah.
But in this instance, I agree with you. I think it worked.
Yeah. I actually thought that maybe if the film touched on that a little bit more, it would have been much better. Like, if it had hit the ground running with that idea, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. And if it had been an examination of different art forms through time, it would have landed a lot better. But unfortunately, like we said at the start, it just kind of had a lot more to say.
It did. And whilst it is to the film's detriment overall, I kind of can't help but admire Chazelle for trying so much.
Yeah.
For taking so much on.
Yeah.
And that's why I think my relationship with the film's always going to be a bit complicated, in the sense that I'm always going to feel really conflicted about so many of its key parts, but overall I'm going to think, fair play.
Yeah.
Fair play for giving it a go, you know.
It's a strange one for him because, like, I loved Whiplash. I really liked that film. I watched it a fair few times. I wasn't that keen on La La Land, thinking about it. I enjoyed it fine, but I don't think I'm going to rush to see it again because I struggle with musicals and I thought it was a bit too soppy.
Okay.
And then First Man, I think might actually be his best.
See, I've not seen First Man.
Oh, it's really good, man. It's genuinely a really good watch. And that just goes to show that Chazelle might be a lot more at home with focusing on one character. Because he does it so brilliantly, and he's really good at sort of delving into people's psyches.
Okay.
But with a script like Babylon, it's really difficult to do that. I mean, he succeeds in some respects, but despite the fact it's 3 hours, 12 minutes long, he never really lands into one person's mind.
And you don't think he really lands in any meaningful way in any of the key themes of the film. I mean, there's this idea of nostalgia, something we've already touched on in the previous episode. We mentioned quite a lot in our podcast because it's something that's clearly of great interest to both of us.
Yeah. And
I think he handles that semi-well. I think there's the sort of, obviously there's a lot of reverence for that period of history in terms of it being a time of great innovation and the sort of limitlessness of that innovation at the time. I think now we sort of spoke about this before, but you know, we've got all this technology and yet it seems so shackled by the sort of expectations of audience, studio heads, all that sort of stuff. Whereas at that point there was none of that. And you really get the sense that it's this embryonic thing. No one quite knows what to do with it. No one quite knows the impact of it. It's making them a shed load of money. Yeah. And there's just this limitlessness to it. And even when it gets to the point of addressing the transition, the technological innovation, the arrival of sound in films, which is a huge moment, and we've sort of spoken about this briefly when we discussed Sunset Boulevard, but you know, the casualties that are left behind. And I think there are some touching moments in that. I mean, there's that scene with Brad Pitt and Kim Cattrall when she sort of they have this sort of back and forth, and she's basically saying, well, sometimes it is just someone's time. Yeah. That's it. You've had your time and it's just done, and there's nothing you can do about it. Again, incredibly overt. Yeah. not subtle. But then is that something we should level at Chazelle? I don't know, because given the use of the camera, the way the scenes that are involved in the film, is subtlety really the name of the game here when he's got so much reverence?
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't. I mean, there's that big montage at the end, which I really hated, actually. But that aside, it isn't a subtle film at all. And I like that scene between Brad Pitt and Kim Cattrall. It's like, it just kind of goes to show just how ruthless the court of public opinion is. And that was interesting. The way he played it was quite, actually, ironically enough, quite subtle. I'm actually, weirdly, how this podcast is going on, I'm like, actually, maybe Brad Pitt was quite good in this film. I don't know. But yeah, it's...
I think we always said that he was good. It's just that his performance is, as you said, derivative of more recent roles that were in better films, that do things that at least have a sort of bit more of a handle on what they're trying to do and say.
I think.
And if they don't, they're happy to sort of let the audience be enveloped by that, as opposed to being thrust in it time and time again to make the point clear, like it is here. Yeah. But again, that talks to what we were saying before about the nostalgic element of the film, that there is all of this, there's the hilarity and the hedonism, but there is this. I mean, it's tacked on the sort of the darkness. Obviously, there's the casualties, people that overindulge. I mean, Margot Robbie's character completely overindulges and becomes a shell of her former self, full of these aspirations that she has. I mean, and there's a suggestion that her life before has scarred her in ways unimaginable. Yeah, and that will ultimately be her downfall when given all of this success, that she has to sort of she ends up sort of being consumed by it. So there is obviously and the racial element too. I mean, it's again, it's not really touched upon in a hugely significant way, which I think is maybe to the film's detriment. Yeah, I agree. Because the film sort of sets this idea up that these parties are this place of incredibly liberal for the time ideals. You've got like a lot of.
This was pre-Hays Code, right? So, there was no limit to anything. It was a new medium, and it was exciting, and everyone was just experimenting with it, basically.
I mean, and I don't take issue with that in terms of the film, because they were people from different ethnic backgrounds who were trailblazers, who were breaking glass ceilings, as it were, in a time that it must have been fucking really difficult to do so. Yeah. But I just think the way, again, going back to those party scenes, I'm thinking, was it as liberal as this? And I'm not saying that as if it's like a criticism of it being liberal, but in terms of does it treat the era with the seriousness? If it's going to talk about the dark side of nostalgia, then does the film fall victim of the thing that it's trying to critique? You know what I mean?
I think actually, you're right there, because it does present these images to you in a kind of quite gleeful fashion. And yet also it has the gall to say, but but it's bad, all this kind of stuff. It's confusing and
it's strange, isn't it?
Something you said earlier that sort of was interesting. I actually quite liked the Tobey Maguire section.
Oh yeah,
the bit where he takes him to this horrendous underground sex fight club. I don't really know what it is, but it was a weird moment, and it felt out of place, like a lot of scenes in this film. But I quite liked it. I don't know, I thought it was a welcome relief. I was like, okay, this is quite frightening.
It was pretty dark.
Yeah.
I just felt it was really derivative of the drug scene in Boogie Nights.
Yeah, no, I do. I think you're actually right there. A lot of this is.
Yeah, and we talk about this with you again. Another word, derivative, alongside hedonism, said a lot in this podcast, this particular episode. But I just think lots of these moments have just been done so much better in other films, and I think that I don't know. It does take the whole film into the realms of pastiche in a way that isn't positive.
No, actually, I mean, thinking about it. Yeah, Boogie Nights is just Boogie Nights, basically. Like the majority of this film is, if you think about it from a narrative standpoint, it's basically Boogie Nights, but it's not as interesting, because Boogie Nights is about the kind of pornography industry, and there's a point in that film where there's a transition from film to video, and it's like the same. It's like, it's from the silent era to the talkies, but then in Boogie Nights it's from the kind of 16mm film to videotape, and how that changed the industry. And you've got like a plethora of different characters in both films. Like, was it copied a little bit? Like, it was clearly a point of reference for Chazelle, without a doubt, because it's always scary how similar those two films are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What about the film's sort of cinematic element? Because we've talked about how impressive it looks, but it started to bother me a bit too much how dynamic that camera was. I'm not saying that it's something that I really will hold against the film or Chazelle moving forward, but I just think that dynamism, that excitement, it moved with that same level of excitement the narrative has. Yeah. And whereas the excitement for the narrative ends up taking it into sort of negative territory, I think the camera does as well, the movement.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It was jarring and unnecessary. The story didn't call for that. Like, what is it he does? He puts it on a big crane and just swoops in, doesn't it? It's like the kind of, it's like zooming in, except he's actually moving the camera in, not just using the lens. There's a particularly nasty one near the end when it's the scene in the cinema, which has that stupid montage as well, with the ink in water. What the fuck was that about? Anyway, but yeah, the camera just like it's just showing off.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can describe it.
And the way he would quickly pan the camera between characters and discussions for comedic effect. But I mean, that didn't register with me.
No, it works in like Clerks. Yeah, that bit in the car in Clerks where it's like just panning back and forth, but not in this.
It's overusing the same joke essentially over and over again, which is never a good thing.
No.
Unless you're sort of making a wider point about its overuse in other things in a satirical manner. Yeah. Maybe that's it, but I don't think so. I'm not so sure about that.
No, I think he just loved to move it about and sweep it around and kind of pat himself and his director of photography on the back afterwards.
I mean, the film looks glorious.
Yes, it does. It's colour graded nicely.
Just quickly then, because I've just realised, we're really running over here. We did say it'd be meaty.
Oh, yeah.
The script was another area of issue for me. We've talked about a couple of those scenes that I guess shined a little bit. But again, subtlety wasn't the name of the game. And again, we've already said, is that an issue? But I think, just for me, I think it is a little bit.
Yeah, the very fact that we're pondering over it suggests to me that it could have done with a lot of cutting and a lot of shifting about. It was a bit underdeveloped. I thought a bit underbaked.
I mean, there was a few bits where just people going, we can go into this industry and follow our dreams, and it's like, this isn't, I don't know, this isn't done with irony.
No.
I mean, it's done in the sense that this is obviously going to be referenced back to when we are cast back to Margot Robbie as that sort of wide-eyed, optimistic individual when she's so far in deep into that sort of moral quagmire that the industry has sort of thrown her in. But I'm just not convinced by some of those elements narratively. I think, and structurally, and the way they're presented in the script, I just think it's a bit naff. And I think arguably one of the weaker elements in the film, because I can sort of forgive the camera, I can sort of forgive maybe the elements of the history that it stretches and distorts to suit the sort of the approach that Chazelle clearly wants to take. But I'm not sure.
Do you think he's trying too hard?
I think so.
To be a Tarantino, to be a David Lynch, to be that.
I think this is a big statement movie.
Yeah.
This is a film that says, look at not just look how much I love films, but it's also look at how much I can handle, look how much I can do. This is like a big statement movie, not just in terms of the film he's made, but literally as well for him as a filmmaker. And I admire that. I admire that he's gone out and done that and said, well, I can punch with the best of them. Yeah. At least in his mind.
Well.
But I think he's bitten off way more than he can chew.
Yeah, and I think his next film would be a lot smaller. I'll be very surprised if they give him more than like 30 million to make his next one. That quite often happens, is when there's such a big swing and such a big miss, they can quite often go back to their roots. Eventually, I mean, for like someone like Shyamalan, it takes a few films. But then, in the same vein, it can actually produce some really interesting work.
I mean, look at Nolan. I mean, obviously Tenet didn't do that well.
No.
So, and he's done Oppenheimer, which is a significantly smaller budget.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure if that's necessarily the studios doing that to Nolan, because I imagine Nolan's probably got a free pass a little bit, given that
this is a different studio. This one.
It's not Warner Brothers, is it?
No, it's Universal, I think.
Oh wow, okay. So there we go. Interesting to see that. I'm not sure the reasons to that. I can't imagine he would have been forced into that, but it's just an interesting comparison, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this is slightly kind of going on a bit of a tangent, but Tenet was his meant to be a big kind of tentpole thing, and COVID fucked it a little bit, along with not mixed reviews and mixed public opinion.
I think it's Nolan being drunk on himself.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah,
look, it's that sort of classic debate. We're on Nolan now for a minute.
Yeah.
But it's that classic sort of thing that I think a lot of people have with Nolan. Either he's cinema's greatest saviour or he's a pseudo-intellectual shit flinger. And people don't seem to be quite sure which side of the camp he is in.
Yeah.
I personally think his best film's Dunkirk because there's no posturing in Dunkirk. It's just a film about Dunkirk that he does really well.
Yeah, and there's the sound's nice as well.
Yeah, because his sound in films is fucking.
Tenet was particularly bad.
Yeah, and like the third installment of the Batman.
Yeah,
there's
a lot of problems with that.
I don't know.
I think my favourite Nolan film is The Prestige.
Okay,
I really like The Prestige.
That doesn't surprise me for some reason. And I'm glad that is your favourite film.
Yeah, the same way that First Man is my favourite Chazelle film. I don't really know why.
I love that though.
Yeah.
I think it's good. That sounds like I'm really taking the piss there, but I'm being genuine. That's good, mate.
That,
well done, mate.
Oh, The Prestige magic.
Fucking loser. No, that was being genuine. One thing I guess we need to touch on before the end, before the outro, a famed outro, is that love letter to film, because we've talked a little bit about nostalgia, the history that he covers, the transition, but there's the love letter to the medium.
Yeah.
And I think in large part he sort of half succeeds, because you can clearly tell that he loves the medium, obviously. He's a fucking film director. But there is a lot of reverence there. And even if these film stars are long dead, and many of them, their careers were cut short by that transition into sound recording, or the use of sound recording, there's that idea that, you know, when you put those films through and put them on the big screen, they come to life again. Yeah. And I really like that idea. I like that idea for someone that adores the medium and will continue to until I die. You know, it's a special thing to think about that, and to, I don't know, I feel like, the reverence is overbearing, but it's almost deserved, in the sense that it was one of the biggest innovations of human history, certainly culturally. Yeah. And I think he acknowledges that it's important to have that mindset. Yeah. And at least the attempt to inject that into the sort of mainstream landscape is commendable.
Yeah, I mean, he's dealing with a medium that immortalizes people visually and also their voice. Mm-hmm. And so he does, whilst I have a lot of problems with the way he approached it at the end, the message is a nice one, and definitely the love is genuine. It's not just him trying to copy Tarantino of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's trying to put his own personal spin on it. Yeah. But
that's 5 minutes.
Yeah, it just...
Holy shit, that was poor.
It was a real shame.
It is. I mean, this idea, he sort of... Spoilers. I mean, if you've listened this far, I assume...
Last 5 minutes of a 3-hour film.
But he sort of does like a snapshot of the history of film, the innovations that have sort of punctuated film's history. And I find that quite strange. And it kind of, I don't know, like, it devalued it a little bit for me, I thought. And I'm not saying that it isn't sort of, when you look through that, it didn't have an impact on me, because you do get to see the progression. It is interesting. But it's not, I don't know, not merited, and it feels a bit cheesy.
Yeah.
And completely out of place with the rest of the film. I mean, fucking Avatar's in it, for Christ's sake. Then it cuts back to some guy, or one of the lead characters, some guy, it's a bit throwaway, sat in a cinema in the 1950s, crying for some reason. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on here, man? Like, just end the film. You could have ended this film probably about 15, 20 minutes ago.
Oh, yeah, you could have ended it at the point where Brad Pitt makes the impassioned speech about how much people love what he works on. Like, that is a wonderful illustration of what you were trying to say at the end. Yeah. You don't need to put that montage of that ink splodging in the water. Like, that was too much. It didn't fit into the rest of the film.
And then the bright sort of colours.
Yeah.
Is that some sort of bizarre sort of attempt to please Goddard, Lord Goddard? I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. It feels, and it's I don't know, thrown in at the end. Yeah. I'm sure that was his intention all the way through, to have that scene in. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have my sort of finger on the pulse of
Mate, I'd love
Hollywood
to
executives and the decisions that are made behind closed doors on people's films. But I don't know. I just think that for me it felt tacked on. And there's so much debate at the moment about how precarious the landscape of Hollywood is at the moment. And then to go up to that point, I don't know, maybe there is something there, in the sense that he's coming from one precarious time to another. Yeah. I don't know.
He might be trying to comment on the fragility of the going to, the act of going to the theatre. Obviously, the pandemic's it's made a lot of cinemas suffer, and that's maybe what he was trying to say. And I kind of sort of understand where he was coming from, if that was what he's trying to do.
The experience of the cinema in terms of, obviously, there's nothing wrong with watching films at home. That's the main way I watch movies. But the cinema experience is something to be cherished, and I think that's what he wants to sort of get across. But it didn't really.
Don't set your film in the 20s then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, if that's what the ultimate message was going to be, he could have done that so much more subtly.
Or the idea that, it's all here on the silver screen. We've gone from, people innovating in the 20s and when you watch films from that era, there's something so lovely and beautiful about it. And now we've got blue people riding pterodactyl things. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just don't know what the point was, but whatever, Damien.
Whatever, mate. Would have loved to be in a fly on the wall when he was deciding what films to put in there.
Yeah.
He's obviously, they've got this mammoth task of being like, right, we need to basically represent all of cinema. In 5 minutes. Max. Jesus, how do you decide what films to put in? I don't know why they landed on Avatar. I guess technologically sort of makes sense, I suppose. But
Terminator 2 was in there as well.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Oh Christ, it was.
Yeah.
A lot of James Cameron ones, isn't there?
Yeah, there you go. Maybe a little favour there. Bit of a handy.
Not
a hand job.
No,
we don't want to start putting out rumours that Chazelle's been giving James Cameron hand jobs.
Mate, it'll be the tomorrow's newspaper.
Two losers suggest some bizarre exchange of sexual favours, just so Cameron can get 2 stills from his film. On to Damien Chazelle's film. However,
right.
That's that.
That's Babylon.
Interesting film. I will always say it's an interesting film, and I know it always seems like a bit of a cop-out, a non-committal, and I think we maybe have come across more negative than I actually feel about it, but I think overall I stand by those criticisms, but I will say I didn't regret seeing it.
No, me neither. I would say I'd recommend watching it, but I wouldn't. I'd kind of recommend it with caution.
Yes.
It's polarizing. So, don't come back to me when you hated it and fell asleep.
Yeah. We're not. Yeah, it's a good thing we don't say our address at the start of the podcast, isn't it? That'd be quite ballsy, though, wouldn't it? Saying our address if you want to come and not that anyone listens. The people that listen know our addresses anyway. Why are you here? Why are you trying to fight me about this film? Like, we're mates. Like, right.
Nice.
Right.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then. Another big sprawling discussion. It's funny, we criticise Chazelle for being sprawling, and we've just been sprawling for the last hour and a bit. But there we go.
Sorry, Damien.
We're 2 people sat in a squalid living room. We make films for a living, so there we go.
All right, we've got a big telly.
Yeah, that's true. There's a big telly here.
Nice
telly. So, focusing on to the next episode. Or episodes, I should say.
Yes.
Because we've got a few ideas and a few films we want to discuss. So I'm just going to tell you them now to whet your appetite. Ooh. So the first film will be The Whale.
Nice.
The Return of Frasier.
Yeah.
Not
Frasier the sitcom.
Yeah. Apparently he's moved to Portishead.
Really?
Yeah. Kelsey Grammer now lives in Portishead. I don't know how true that is. I don't want to get sued for saying that, but apparently he lives in Portishead.
Yeah. Fraser's return, yeah.
Fraser.
And arguably, would you say Aronofsky's potential return as well?
Yeah, I think he's dabbled in he dabbled with a bit of mainstream blockbuster, didn't he? With Noah.
He did Noah, and then he did Mother! !
Oh, see, I haven't seen Mother, so I might watch that in preparation, maybe.
Yeah, that really, I mean, he didn't make another film for a while, and I don't think he took kindly to its reception.
I remember, hearing
he was
that.
a bit sore about it, I think.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to cover that and a discussion around the way the film portrays the loner.
Yes. Ooh, nice.
Which I think is a lot of great films there to discuss.
Yeah, definitely.
Quite swiftly after that, however, we have another film, The Fabelmans.
Yes.
A semi-autobiographical effort by the maestro Steven Spielberg.
Yes. We've got a guest. Got a special guest for that one.
Well,
haven't we?
We have. We have got the OG,
Yeah.
Cineboys to Cinemen, Alfie Martin, the dear Alfie Martin will be on for that episode. We can confirm that.
Looking forward to it.
It's going to be good. It's going to be like old times, the three of us
Yeah.
back together.
Lovely.
Really looking forward to that. And we're also toying with an episode about Disney.
Yeah, so a bit more of a general discussion as we did with our nostalgia episode. We're going to talk a little bit about Disney and the kind of subjectivity of the film experience. So, we talked a little bit about it in the podcast today, but I'm fascinated by the kind of what makes people sit down and watch films, and talking about that subject in the context of Disney is fascinating because Hannah, my wife, absolutely adores it, and she's got such a warm, almost uncompromising opinion of them, and she just thinks they're brilliant, and she will, no matter what I say about Disney, she will really defend them to the nth degree. So I just think it'll be really interesting to discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a company that have gripped the sort of tastes of so many people our age, in our generation.
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
And I think it's just a really interesting area. We're going to talk about their films, sort of reasons for why people are so in love with their output, and also their position in the current landscape. And is that dominance that they currently have a problem for Hollywood?
Definitely.
Or for the wider industry? Lots to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely.
For all five of you, lots to look forward to, including me and you, who have to listen back to it.
Yeah, mainly.
Yeah,
I'll put it on. We've got a little work group, just called Podcast Lovers, and I will put this podcast on there. So you never know. Fingers crossed, might turn into 6.
Oh, fantastic!
Exciting.
Right.
Yeah.
Have a lovely weekend.
Yes.
And we'll be seeing you in the next one.
See you soon.
Cheers.
Bye bye.